Jace Yarbrough, Republican candidate for the newly drawn 32nd Congressional District. Thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thanks for having me, Jack. I appreciate it.
You bet. So why are you running for Congress and what is the essence of your campaign?
Sure. Well, first of all, as a Christian, I think the Lord has certain vocations for each one of us. He gives us interests and abilities, background, experience, and connections, and we're supposed to use those in a certain type of work that He has for us. And my conviction is, my understanding is that politics and sort of cultural engagement and confrontation is part of my vocation. So I've been in this world for a time, done a number of things, and when this opportunity came up, I was grateful to see our legislature create these 5 new Republican seats in order to provide backup and reinforcements for the President and the America First agenda in Congress. We got into this race, you may know, kind of at the last minute. There was an America First candidate that was going to be in this race, and ultimately that didn't work out, and she decided not to run. And when that happened, we looked around, saw the field, and realized that there wasn't a viable America First candidate in the race. And so we got in order to be that and to provide for the people of Texas 32 that option. This is a Trump plus 17 district, a very Republican, very red district. I'm very proud to be that America First candidate in the race. Our campaign is unabashedly a supporter of the President and his agenda. We are here to fight for that agenda and to move the ball forward and really make permanent a lot of the gains that have been realized by his administration just in this past year.
As you know, you've got a very crowded field of candidates. You have 8 others that you're going up against, and all the Republicans say they support President Trump and his policies. But I'm wondering, at the end of the day, why should Republican primary voters select you over the others?
Sure. Well, I think, every election cycle, politicians stand up and say things that they know voters want to hear, and we, the voters, hope that we can trust them, and a lot of times, unfortunately, we find out that we probably can't. I would say the first thing is look at the past actions and behavior of each of the candidates in the race. And so I'm very proud of my history and the things that I've done to demonstrate my commitment to putting America first, whether it's standing up to wokeism in the military or refusing the COVID-19 vaccine when others attempted to force it on me, whether my employer or the military itself, starting a classical Christian farm school for my children and other children in my community whose parents didn't want them to be indoctrinated with a lot of unfortunate ideologies that we all realize were being pushed on our kids kind of during COVID. And so I think that's an important piece. And so, I'm very much open and authentic about my convictions. They're very consistent, and the President's agenda is very consistent with my past. But there's also, in addition to sort of policy conviction, there's also a disposition, I think, that's really important, and it sets apart those who are seeking to represent what I call kind of the new right, or others have called the new right, the America First right. And that is a disposition that says, look, Republicans for too long have simply played defense, and they think that's enough, right? Now, I'm grateful for many things about William Buckley, but he famously said, right, we stand athwart history yelling stop. And at the end of the day, a defensive strategy, as Napoleon said, ultimately leads to defeat. We are experiencing a kind of slow motion cultural or civilizational suicide. We are being defeated, and Republicans too often offer what the left wants just at a slightly slower pace. Our approach, whether as demonstrated through the kind of work that I do on the legal side, for example, bringing lawsuits against the left, is to say it's time for Republicans to go on offense, to take ground, to have a positive vision of where we want to go, and to fight for that, and not simply refrain from using power because we're afraid the left is going to do that to us, or because we somehow want to impress moderates with our self-control. Right? Those days are over. We have an objective, we have a country to go save, and we need to go save it. And to do that, we have to go on offense, and we have to fight back. And I think that makes me different from each of the other candidates that's running in this race.
What did you mean when you said that, basically describing the country as committing suicide? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, well, I think there's something inherent in the kind of liberal project, which ultimately leads to what I sometimes refer to and others refer to as civilizational suicide. What do I mean by that? We can feel as Americans that a lot of our common spaces are becoming more chaotic. We're slowly being pulled apart as a people. We don't share kind of common loves with our fellow citizens, and sometimes we don't even understand where they're coming from or their behavior. Sometimes the behavior between fellow citizens is very antagonistic. Why is that? At the end of the day, I think it's because institutions that used to be about forming national cohesion by giving us all a sort of common understanding of who we are as a people, instilling in us a love for our heritage and who we are as Americans, those institutions have now been used, in fact, to cause us to hate those things. And I point to public schools as the prime example of that, right? So much of the ideology pushed on American families and students today is about causing them to hate their heritage, not love it. Now, unfortunately, hatred leads to disintegration, right? Not to get too meta or philosophical, but Aristotle said two friends, the strength of their bond and connection is directly related to the strength of their love for what he called a transcendent third, or a higher value, or a higher ideal. We're losing that common love. And when we do that, we slowly, our bonds are weakened, and then a lot of our common spaces break down.
So what, in your mind, is the solution to changing that, preventing that, et cetera?
Well, I think one of the reasons, the president has so much support across the country is because the policies that he's put forward directly address these issues, right? A big one is immigration. People who come to this country, and our immigration policy, it should be, as the president has said, it should be about creating national cohesion. It should be about bringing those people here ultimately to serve the American people.
You're talking about assimilation.
Correct, yes. If you come here, you need to be interested in being a part of who we are as a country. You need to be grateful for who we are as a people, and you have to have a desire to be a part of that. Obviously, under the Biden administration, we experienced the exact opposite, right? There were networks of folks who were brought here, from criminals to certain, even terrorist organizations that infiltrated our country and are now actively defrauding the American people, causing chaos and havoc in our streets. And one of the reasons I think the president has endorsed our campaign is because we realize the importance and primacy of restoring and returning to an American immigration policy, again, that prioritizes Americans, American families, American students, American workers. Because at the end of the day, average Americans have to depend on a lot of these common spaces like local police departments or schools or libraries or local businesses. And when those local businesses are inundated with, run by, or by foreigners who have no desire to assimilate or be a part of our country, when they're infected with ideologies that cause the people who are in them every day to hate America, well then these common spaces break down. And for average Americans who don't have the means to sort of buffer themselves for those common spaces because they can't, for example, hire their own security forces or bodyguards, well then life gets very expensive and very chaotic, and our civilization starts to break down, and we're weaker as a country.
How did you win the endorsement from President Trump and Governor Abbott, and what does it say about your campaign?
At the end of the day, you'd have to ask them ultimately. I can tell you the things that I'm proud of and what I was trying to communicate to each of those gentlemen and others.
You talked to them?
I have not spoken directly with President Trump, but from afar, through surrogates, I have spoken to the governor.
Okay.
Through surrogates and other things, right? What I wanted to indicate in the first instance was, these are the policy convictions that I have. I absolutely support the president's convictions about immigration, about affordability, about America First Abroad, the disposition that says we're going to go on offense and take ground. We're going to have a positive vision that we're pushing for. But also, I think it demonstrates just how hard we were willing to work as a team, how effective our team is. So those who are paying really close attention may know, we got in on the last day to file, but we didn't really hard launch our campaign until January 5th. That's barely a month ago. But we have been working incredibly hard because me and my team and our supporters recognize how important it is to make sure that there's an America First fighter in each of these 5 new Republican seats. And Texas 32 is one of those. It's a new Republican seat, used to be controlled by the Democrats, going to be controlled by a Republican. We're going to send a Republican to Congress from this district. And so I think they looked at that and saw, this is someone who is very much not only in alignment with our policies and our agenda, has proven that he will fight for them effectively in the past, but also has the team, the support, and the competence to go out and really connect with the voters and build a coalition that can win.
When we last talked to you, I know you were running for a state Senate seat up in northern Collin County, Sanger area, et cetera. Are you moving to the new district? And is that an issue, or?
Yes. Thanks for raising that. It's an important issue. So we are moving back into the new lines for Texas 32, where we lived for a number of years, where I served as a precinct chair, where our 4th was born. I think at the end of the day, what conservative voters want, they want somebody who lives in and among them and who shares their values. So we thought long and hard about the residency issue because it's going to be, that's a significant commitment by our family to do that, to come back to where we lived for a time. But ultimately we decided to because, there was someone who was probably going to win the race who not only doesn't live in the district, has not indicated that he has any intention of moving into the district, and in fact has some fairly obvious sort of past statements about public policy that show that he would undermine the president's agenda, particularly on the issue of immigration and amnesty. And those values are inconsistent with the GOP voters of Texas 32, again, who are very supportive of the president. So we wanted to offer that to the voters and say, hey, we share your values, we're coming back here, and we're open about that. This is who we are, and if that's, if that aligns with your values, then we'd appreciate your support and your vote. And we've been overwhelmed by the response. I mean, the endorsements we've received from folks across the district, from city councilmen and county commissioners to young Republicans groups in many of the counties in the district, has really been positive. We're grateful for it. But yeah, that's kind of how that issue lines up and how I've thought about it and how we've thought about it when it comes to this race.
So you're in the process of moving back to the district?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. You talked about affordability, and I'm wondering what ideas do you have if you get to Congress? What bills would you be proposing to try to help people with their cost of living?
Well, I think the first thing to say about affordability and the genius of the president's approach is for a long time we have operated under a kind of maximalist global free market policy that assumes that our foreign adversaries are abiding by the rules and principles of the free market. And of course that's not true with someone like the Communist Party of China. They're an interventionist or enemy, they're an interventionist opponent and global competitor. They manipulate their currency, they engage in aggressive sort of economic quote unquote diplomacy, and that has resulted in the loss of some once great American companies. And so I, in the first instance, am a supporter of the president's approach to tariffs, for example, to say we're going to make sure that we protect American industry. We're not going to allow foreigners to come in and undermine American wages. Those are the kind of policies that I support, again, because I think it's the reality of the global market that we live in. And so in addition to that, I'll say in the first instance, the free market is the best mechanism for lifting people out of poverty, creating the best and most competitive products and services for our consumers. We should be about promoting the free market and figuring out how to do that. Right now, I think the president, again, is rightly calibrating toward us toward a recognition that says there are foreign adversaries that are intervening such that we, in fact, don't have a free market, even within our own country, right? Because when we abide by those principles and others don't, it makes our behavior predictable, such that our foreign adversaries can, in fact, dictate the kind of industries that are available here, the jobs that are available to our high school and college graduates, and we should stand against that. So in general, that's how I think about economics.
I know that the tariffs have brought in and generated a lot of revenue to the federal government. At the same time, it is still a tax on people who are bringing in goods and services, and it has had an impact on small businesses. Now, there has been some debate as to the impact. They really haven't, raised prices all that much. They haven't caused a spike in inflation as some feared. But I'm wondering, what do you say to that some people have been hurt by these tariffs, Americans, small businesses, et cetera. And, what do you say to those folks?
Well, I think you alluded to it, right? In fact, it's not the case that, there was a big argument that, consumers are going to bear the full cost of these tariffs, right, if we implement. And in fact, that's not the case. What we're seeing is a number of the bad actors in the system, in fact, bore those costs. Every government policy has upsides and downsides, right? And so what we have to ask ourselves is, what's the downside to allowing the Chinese Communist Party to dictate and determine what American industry is and what its profile is? And I think the hollowing out of the middle class is a great example of some of the harms that result from that. And so while I don't want any small business owner, obviously, to be harmed, I want flourishing small businesses. I want free markets for those actors and those entrepreneurs. But the reality is we live in a world in which those from the outside have been taking advantage of the American economy and weakening us as a nation. So we've got to get back to a position of strength, I would say, economically, where we acknowledge that reality and do the best we can to say we're no longer going to allow our foreign adversaries to dictate sort of outlines of our economy, and I think that's a good thing. And I think the downsides from allowing the CCP to continue that interventionist effort far outweigh other short-term consequences that I don't want to belittle or dismiss. But this is the world we live in.
DHS funding, as you know, we're talking on a Wednesday here, but on Saturday, DHS may lose its funding, may have to shut down. And this is all over ICE and how it operates. Democrats are trying to get some changes to how ICE operates, and I'm wondering, what do you make of this battle that's taking place right in front of us and the fact that DHS may be forced to shut down?
So I think the reason the left has gone so berserk in Minnesota is because conservatives and the right under the Trump administration are pushing back against what I think is their long-term project to take control of the country through things like importing millions of illegals and then giving them the right to vote and then winning elections from now into the foreseeable future. And so I support DHS, I support ICE, I support the president's efforts in Minnesota to reassert law and order. Obviously, it's a tragedy anytime there's a loss of life. That is not an outcome that anyone wants. But I do think it's important to step back and say, these enforcement actions are happening across the country. But there's a reason that these tragedies happen only in blue states, and in particular blue states that are controlled by what I would consider radical leftist leaders who like the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, encourage these leftist supporters to go out and, quote, put their bodies on the line. They're seeking physical confrontation with law enforcement. That is not the correct solution. In fact, what we want as Americans and what the American people voted for was an enforcement of our immigration laws. We want to get military-age men, and particularly criminals, off our streets. And insofar as these blue state governors and mayors are interfering with that, I put the blame on them for creating this, this chaos and this loss of life. Because again, these enforcement actions aren't unique to Minnesota; they're happening elsewhere. But the difference is that those leaders in other states are cooperating, and I would encourage leaders of blue states to do the same for the safety of their own people.
Do you think, because some Democrats have called for ICE to be abolished, others say it just needs to be overhauled, but do you think that there needs to be a focus on the most violent criminals who got into this country illegally first before doing the rest of these mass deportations, seeking people who've been here for decades, never did anything wrong, and yet they're caught up in a sweep, etc.?
Well, I think the administration is right to prioritize criminals, violent criminals. It's also right to prioritize military-age men. At the end of the day, we are a country of laws, and there's so much fraud in our current immigration and visa policy that I don't think we can ignore the downside to the kind of mass immigration that we are experiencing. For example, every young Republican group in Texas 32 has endorsed our campaign. Why? Because one of the things I talk about is the abuse that exists in the H-1B program and the effect that has on young aspiring professionals. So many of the folks who come over on H-1Bs have fake credentials. They're given preference by HR departments in American companies. And now our students, our citizens, our recent graduates have to compete with that. In addition, these folks who come over on H-1Bs, they're not going to push back whenever they're told you have to work over the weekend, we're going to extend your hours, we're going to cut your pay. Why? Because their residency depends on maintaining that employment. I think they have 30 days from the time they're fired to find a new job, so they're not going to cause any waves. Again, you have to recognize there's a downside to mass immigration, to importing a foreign labor force, even to do white-collar jobs. And one of the reasons I think the president's message has resonated and he's been as successful as he has been is because the American people see that and they want leaders who will acknowledge it. So
what is the solution to that issue?
Well, I think halting, in a serious way, halting almost all, if not all, immigration, cracking down on H-1Bs, insisting that whatever we need, whatever talent we need exists here in the United States, we can raise it up and use it. I think it's a return to prioritizing America and having faith in the American people and the younger generations that, yes, they can rise to the challenge.
Many Republicans in Texas, some nationally, have really gone out and sharply criticized Sharia law,
yes,
CARE, and the Muslim Brotherhood. Where are you on that?
I'm in complete agreement with them. I appreciate members like Congressman Keith Self, who co-founded the Sharia Free America Caucus. Congressman Self has, he's been somebody whose advice I have appreciated during this campaign. He was one of my first federal endorsements. I am committed to being a member of that caucus. I think that Sharia is incompatible with American citizenship, and we should not be apologetic about the fact that at the end of the day, America is a Christian nation. That's a gift that we should embrace. It has enabled, and the principles of Christianity have enabled average Americans to lead noble and dignified lives. Sharia is inconsistent with that, and I'll give you an example. So as a Christian, my obligation is to treat everyone else, regardless of their ideology, their faith system, as a person who has dignity. They're made in the image of God. So if I enter a business contract with you and you aren't of my faith, I still have an obligation to honor my word to you and to honor you as a person. That's not the case with other religions. And in fact, religions, for example, like Islam, some of them say my obligation, my religious obligation, in fact, is to take advantage of the infidel. And so when that's an example of the kind of breakdown in common loves and citizenship that I was referring to earlier. And so I think banning Sharia across the country is a great first step. It's not going to solve the problem, but I support the governor's recent actions, Congressman Self's founding of the Sharia Free America Caucus, the call that the Freedom Caucus has made for banning Sharia across the nation. I'm very much in favor of each of those positions.
Regarding Iran, should the U.S. bomb Iran again, given the reports that we've seen that they are killing, the regime there is killing its own people?
So I'm not read into exactly what's going on the ground in Iran. I support the president's previous action of bombing Iran and stopping their development of nuclear weapons, at least setting it back a number of years. I think that was the right call. And I think the subsequent response has borne out that he was right to make that decision. In terms of, one of the things the president has said is we're not necessarily going to be the moral police here. So we are going to intervene abroad whenever it makes sense to do so for the security of the American people. And while the president's rhetoric has been very supportive of the people of Iran, and I agree with that rhetoric, I don't want anyone to live under the kind of brutal totalitarian regime that exists there. I don't necessarily think that means that it's time for us to and go drop ordnance on the current regime. Now, maybe there are some things about that situation that if I were read in, I would have a firmer perspective one way or the other, but right now I'm agnostic as to whether we should do that.
Gaza, do you support the president's plan to rebuild, and should Hamas be forced to disarm?
I absolutely think Hamas should be forced to disarm. They're a terrorist organization. What they did on October 7th was heinous. In terms of rebuilding Gaza, the president has earned sort of our support on any number of issues in the first instance, and I would support his statements as to what should be done there.
Do you support Israel, and does that extend to, because I know there's some conversations within the GOP about whether there should still be financial support for Israel?
Yes. So at the end of the day, I think one of the key lenses through which we should understand our international partners and our international adversaries is the threat of radical Islam. And obviously, Islam hates Israel, Iran hates Israel, and they hate us. They want to destroy us. We have a common enemy. And what I say, I hear from folks on the campaign trail a lot. We're concerned about international aid, blank checks being written to any foreign government. And as an America First candidate, I say we need to look carefully and very critically at aid that goes out the door, because at the end of the day, what we want is for it to be in service to the American people and our protection. We have an ally in Israel in a volatile region of the country where radical Islam is obviously on the rise. And so we have common cause there. And I think radical Islam wants to destroy America. They want to destroy Israel. And anything we can do to fight them over there on their turf, we should absolutely be about doing that and supporting those who are allies with us in combating radical Islam, including Israel.
Last question. Nicolas Maduro was captured by U.S. military, brought to the United States to stand trial on federal criminal drug trafficking charges. Did you support that, oppose that? Why not? And what do you want to see happen in Venezuela next?
Yes, absolutely supported it. It was the right call. It was a law enforcement action, and I think it sent the right message to other leaders around the world, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, which is to say, if you allow your national apparatus and infrastructure, and even enable it to be used to, as it was being used in Venezuela, to create hundreds of thousands of tons of poison and ship them into the United States year over year, resulting in the death of untold numbers of Americans, then we are going to indict you here, and we will come and find you and bring you to justice. And that's exactly what happened in this case. In terms of what happened next, I think one of the president's genius, his genius is that he shifts the incentive structure for international leaders, as he did in Venezuela. So he didn't come in necessarily and say, this is who I want to sort of come in next, this is what I want you to do. He simply drew a couple of red lines and said, you may not threaten the American people with 250,000 tons of cocaine every year, I think is what the number was. That's a red line, and if you cross it, there will be consequences. As to who comes next and the affirmative or positive actions they take, I think he's been fairly agnostic, and I think that's the right approach, is to say, under this new shift and return to the Monroe Doctrine, the Western Hemisphere is our neighborhood, and we're going to protect it. Don't threaten the American people. That's what I think the right message is to send to leaders like those who are going to come after Maduro.
Jace Yarbrough, candidate for the 32nd Congressional District. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jack.
We appreciate it.
Yep, glad to be here.